Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
When I was about 10, my mom, who'd always been a bit of a gold digger, hooked up with this rich dude while she was still married to my dad. She ended up getting pregnant twice and tried to pass the kids off as my dad's. Eventually, the truth came out, and my parents got divorced. Now, here's where things get interesting. My grandpa had set aside a chunk of money for his grandkids, originally meant for 3 of us, but when he found out that my half-siblings weren't actually related to him, he decided to give it all to me. My mom threw a fit, still expecting the money for her new kids, but Grandpa basically told her to take a hike. Fast forward a few years, and my half-sister's heading off to college. Apparently, she can't be bothered to get a normal job for spending money, so my mom and her new husband start harassing me for cash. They've tried twice now, but all I've offered them is a wad of used chewing tobacco before telling them to scram. So, that brings us to today. I'm out in the shop getting the tractor ready for some field work. I've got Hank Williams Jr. blasting, a cold beer in hand, just minding my own business. Suddenly, I hear a knock at the door. It's my mom's husband. Let's call him Nice Guy, or NG for short, because he's actually not that bad. NG asked if we could talk for a minute. I told him to come in, joking that I wouldn't bite. He chuckled nervously and then dropped the bomb that he was leaving my mother. I expressed sympathy and offered him a drink, which he politely declined, saying he didn't drink before supper. I slowly hid my beer, remembering it was only 9 in the morning. When I asked what made him realize my mom wasn't the one, he explained it was her excessive spending and emotional manipulation to get more money. I compared her to my old Volkswagen, always breaking down and costing more than it's worth. He then told me about the final straw, my mom's obsession with all things British after watching The Crown, and her insistence on going to London. I joked that she probably wanted to be the new queen, or at least the queen of chavs, with her makeup and spray tan. NG chuckled and explained how he came home with divorce papers instead of plane tickets after a month of her badgering. I asked how that went down, and he described my mom's dramatic reaction, crying, screaming, and eventually packing her things to stay at her cousin's house. He mentioned she was getting a divorce lawyer but seemed to have forgotten about their prenup. We then discussed my half-siblings. NG told me about my sister's angry calls and texts, complaining about having to work at Walmart while in college. I remarked that I thought working while studying was normal, like paying taxes. When I inquired about my brother, NG explained his questionable life choices, including selling dab pens and idolizing Andrew Tate. I bluntly told NG that my brother sounded like an incel. NG wrapped up the conversation by warning me that my mom might show up asking for money since he'd cut her off financially. I assured him I could handle it, joking about putting her in the feedlot. I also asked about her car, and he said he'd already returned it to the dealership. With that, NG left to go play golf. After he left, I finished my beer, contemplating my mom's predicament. I briefly considered harassing my sister at work, but decided against it. A few days later, while I was out in the field, I spotted an unfamiliar car pulling up to the house. As I got closer, I realized it was my mom. I parked the tractor and braced myself for the incoming drama. My mom greeted me enthusiastically, claiming she'd been looking all over for me. When I asked what she wanted, she scolded me for my tone and explained her dire situation. I correctly guessed that she needed money. She confirmed this, complaining about her ex-husband leaving her with nothing and mentioning my sister's college expenses. She tried to guilt-trip me by invoking family ties. I reminded her of her past actions, including not helping me when I needed it and trying to pass off her new kids as my dad's. She dismissed this as being in the past and insisted we needed to stick together. She then brought up the money my grandfather left me, suggesting I should share it with her and my sister. I refused, and this angered her, and she demanded to know how I could treat her this way after all she'd done for me. I sarcastically listed her misdeeds, lying, cheating, and trying to scam her own father, before attempting to leave. She grabbed my arm to stop me, threatening to tell everyone what an ungrateful son I was. I called her bluff, saying everyone already knew what kind of person she was, and warned her to leave before I called the sheriff. She started crying, but I ignored her theatrics and walked back to my tractor. As I climbed in, I watched her stomping back to her car and slamming the door shut. It's not the happy ending she was hoping for, but it sure feels like justice to me. After losing my job due to the pandemic, I found myself struggling to make ends meet. With my savings dwindling, I had no choice but to move to a low-income apartment complex in a less desirable part of town. It wasn't ideal, but it was all I could afford while I searched for new employment. At first, things were okay. The apartment was small but clean, and my neighbors were friendly enough. We were all in similar situations, just trying to get by. I even made a few friends in the complex, which helped ease the loneliness of unemployment. But everything changed when the new property manager arrived in December 2020. From the moment I met her, I knew she was going to be trouble. On her very first day, she showed up at my door with a scowl on her face. The property manager immediately tried to ban me from having guests in my apartment. She claimed that anyone who visited me was trespassing on the property. I was shocked and told her that these were my friends who also lived in the complex. I insisted that she couldn't ban me from having visitors. She stubbornly replied that as a property manager, she made the rules and guests weren't allowed. This woman was trying to dictate who I could have in my own home. I told her not to contact me directly again and to speak to my lawyer if she had any issues. Then I slammed the door in her face. About a month later, I came home to find the property manager inside my apartment. Luckily, I had set up a security camera after our first encounter, so I caught the whole thing on film. I demanded to know what she was doing in my apartment and told her to get out. She claimed that, as the landlady, she had the right to be there whenever and for however long she wanted. I told her that wasn't how it worked and that she was breaking and entering. I warned her to leave immediately or I'd call the police. She insisted that I couldn't make her leave because it was her property. I took a step towards her, my patience wearing thin. I gave her one last warning to get out of my apartment right away. She finally left, but not before threatening to call the police on me for threatening her. When the cops showed up, I simply showed them the video of her breaking in. They left without taking any action against me. A few weeks later, I received a summons to appear in eviction court. The property manager had filed a lawsuit against me, claiming I had stabbed another resident and destroyed property in the apartment. In court, the judge asked her to provide evidence of the property destruction. The property manager told the judge that I had flipped all the furniture in my apartment and caused extensive damage to my own property. She was trying to evict me for supposedly damaging my own belongings. The judge saw through her lies, especially when I provided evidence that I was actually the victim of a stabbing by another resident, not the perpetrator. The harassment continued for months. One day, I caught her opening my door without warning. When I asked what she was doing, she said my water heater was leaking and maintenance needed to come in and fix it. I told her that maintenance could come in, but she needed to leave. She ignored me and stormed past me into the apartment anyway. In retaliation, she called the sheriff's department and told them I was heavily armed and had threatened her. The next thing I knew, a SWAT team was at my door. After that incident, I knew I couldn't stay there any longer. It wasn't safe, and my mental health was suffering. I found a new place and moved out as quickly as I could. But I wasn't about to let her get away with everything she'd done. I told my friends, who still lived in the complex, about my experiences, and they started documenting her behavior. Not even a month after I left, they caught her in the act of illegally withholding security deposits and falsely accusing tenants of property damage. My friends banded together and filed a class action lawsuit against her for harassment, fraud, and numerous violations of tenant rights. The case gained traction quickly, and soon the local housing authority launched a full investigation into her practices. As it turned out, I wasn't the only tenant she had terrorized. Dozens of others came forward with similar stories of break-ins, false accusations, and illegal eviction attempts. The evidence was overwhelming. So not only was she fired from her position, but she was also charged with multiple counts of breaking and entering, fraud, and violating tenant rights. The last I heard, she was facing significant fines and possible jail time. I've been a flight attendant for our national airline for over a decade now. It's a job I love, even though it comes with its fair share of challenges. One of those challenges was a pilot we all dreaded working with. Let's call him Captain Jerk. Captain Jerk was notorious for his attitude towards flight attendants. He had this ridiculous idea that only attractive women should be allowed to work as flight attendants. He'd make rude comments, mock people, and generally make life miserable for anyone who didn't meet his standards of beauty. One day, things went too far. We were preparing for a flight when Captain Jerk spotted a new flight attendant he didn't approve of. He actually picked up the intercom and started insulting her in front of everyone. Captain Jerk loudly questioned who thought this unattractive person was fit to fly, using insulting language. He then demanded that security remove her from the plane immediately, calling her an eyesore. The poor girl left in tears. It was heartbreaking and infuriating. Later, a group of us got together to discuss what to do about Captain Jerk. One of my co-workers expressed that we needed to teach him a lesson, stating that he couldn't keep treating us like this. I agreed and told them that I had a flight with him in a couple of days, asking them to leave it to me. I had a plan, but I knew it was best if the others didn't know the details. When the day of the flight came, I made sure to get assigned to the cockpit. Captain Jerk always insisted on having an attractive female flight attendant serve the cabin crew, so it wasn't hard to get the position. A few hours into the flight, the crew asked for food. I prepared their meals, but I had a special ingredient for Captain Jerk's plate. I knew he always ordered beans and rice, so I grated an entire box of chocolate-flavored laxative into his portion. Captain Jerk exclaimed that the food was delicious and asked what I had done differently. I replied casually, mentioning just a little secret ingredient. I watched in horror as he cleaned his plate. This wasn't going according to plan at all. About 20 minutes later, Captain Jerk started looking uncomfortable. Then he bolted for the restroom, and again, and again. Eventually, he just stayed in there. At first, I was satisfied with my revenge. But as hours passed and we got closer to our destination, I started to panic. I overheard the co-pilot talking to air traffic control. The co-pilot explained that they had a situation, describing the captain as indisposed and admitting that he wasn't rated to land the plane. Air traffic control acknowledged this, and the co-pilot informed them that their estimated time of arrival was about 30 minutes. My blood ran cold. I might have just endangered the entire flight. I spent the next half hour in absolute terror, imagining all the horrible outcomes. Just when I thought all hope was lost, the bathroom door opened. Captain Jerk stumbled out looking pale and weak but determined. He said that he would handle the situation. And he did. Despite everything, he managed to land the plane safely. As soon as we touched down, paramedics rushed in and took him away on a stretcher. I felt awful. My plan for a simple prank had almost turned into a disaster. For days I was on edge, waiting for an investigation to start. But nothing happened. I still feel guilty about how far things went. But I can't deny that I sometimes feel that maybe he deserved what happened to him that day anyways. I grew up in a small town where there wasn't much to do. Most of us kids spent our weekends at pasture parties. Basically just a bunch of teenagers hanging out in a field, drinking beer, and getting high. It wasn't exactly the healthiest environment, but it was all we had. I was always a bit of an outsider. My parents worked hard to give me a better life, and I had dreams of going to college and making something of myself. But in a town like ours, having ambitions could make you a target. One night during my junior year, things took a turn for the worse. A group of older guys showed up uninvited to our party. They were in their early 20s and clearly looking for trouble. I noticed them right away, leering at the girls and pushing around some of the younger guys. My friend came up to me looking worried. He told me about the problems these guys were causing and asked if I could help get rid of them. I didn't want to get involved, but I couldn't just stand by and let them harass people. I nodded and gathered a couple of my buddies, telling them we should go talk to the troublemakers. We approached the group trying to look tough despite our nerves. I told them this was a high school party and that they needed to leave. One of the men stepped forward, towering over me. He challenged us, asking who was going to make them leave. I puffed out my chest, getting in his face, and told him we would, warning them to leave before there was trouble. Looking back, it was so cringeworthy. We were just kids trying to act tough. There was a lot of posturing and empty threats thrown around, but eventually, they seemed to back down. I announced to my friends that the crisis was averted and that the men were leaving. I let my guard down and wandered off alone to get another drink. That's when it happened. Out of nowhere, a fist connected with my jaw. Everything went black for a second. When I came to, I was on the ground with the guy on top of me, raining down punches. I could taste blood in my mouth. It felt like it went on forever before my friends finally pulled him off. The physical damage wasn't too bad, all things considered. Some chipped teeth, a misaligned jaw, but the emotional scars ran deeper. I felt humiliated, weak. It shook my confidence for a long time, but I refused to let that moment define me. I threw myself into my studies, determined to get out of that town. And I did. I got a scholarship to a great college, graduated with honors, and landed a job in Austin. I met my wife there. She's amazing, smart, kind, beautiful inside and out. We bought a house in a nice neighborhood and had a little girl. My life was everything I'd ever dreamed of. I thought I put that night behind me, but fate had other plans. It was just a normal day. I was filling up my car at the gas station, my wife and daughter waiting inside. That's when I saw him walking down the sidewalk. He looked rough, dirty clothes, gaunt face, clear signs of drug abuse. But I recognized him instantly. The face tattoo was a dead giveaway. For a moment I froze. All those old feelings came rushing back, the pain and the humiliation. But then I looked at my car, at my beautiful family inside, and I felt a wave of peace wash over me. I called out to him. I greeted him casually, mentioning it had been a while since we'd seen each other. He turned, his eyes widening as he recognized me. He looked shocked, almost scared, like he was seeing a ghost. I told him to take care and be well. I got in my car and drove away, leaving him standing there on the sidewalk. And in that moment, I realized I had won. Not through violence or revenge, but by living my best life. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.